thanks everyone for joining us on the Cafe Conversations on the NEWaukee Cloud Cafe. We do this once a week with different leaders from around the state and different executives. My name is Jeremy Fojut. I am the co-founder of NEWaukee. This is just one of the programs we host weekly. There's a variety of different programs on the Cloud Cafe, and it's really made possible by Ginger Lazovik from Shorewest Realtors. She came aboard and sponsored these programs to make sure they can happen and stay free. Again, if you're interested, sign up for any of the other programs and communications at NEWaukee.com. Welcome, Lieutenant Governor Mandela Barnes, to the program. We'll get started. Thanks. How are you doing today?
I'm great. All things considered, I appreciate you having me. Thanks for putting this together too. Keeping people engaged and informed. The way we do everything is different now, and it's important for us to be, adaptable to keep up with the times. But I'm doing pretty good. I actually just got back from the office. Like I said, I had to virtually met with an elementary or the middle school class. But I'm a little bit late, so please forgive me.
No worries. I see you got the Instapot going too, so that's.
I do. I'm getting ready to make yogurt.
Nice. So I guess we'll get started and just kind of go over. Really, there's no perfect playbook for handling something. We'll get right into the pandemic. Can you maybe pull back the curtain a bit and tell us what's been going on day to day in your office and the governor's office?
Yeah, I'll expose all the secrets.
Well, just a little bit.
Yeah, no. So I'll say though, I'm in Madison at the moment, and I end up going to the office at least 3 days, usually 4 days a week. Just to kind of keep in touch. I have my whole life is Zoom meetings now, and the business of the state does not stop. The work of the state does not stop. So I still make sure I'm in the office, responding to requests, meeting with people, and doing my best to answer a lot of questions that people have. Things are really uncertain, but this is a very fluid situation. The COVID-19 in and of itself is fluid. The pandemic, by virtue, is something that is ever changing. By the day, and sometimes things change by the hour, and we have to be able to respond to that. So the work that we do in our offices, my office and the governor's office, it is also fluid. And most of it is figuring out how do we best position Wisconsin to be successful on the other end of the pandemic. And that means continuing to build our relationships with business community, continuing to build our relationships with partners in education, K-12 and higher education, because everybody's being impacted, in the broader community as well. And a lot of issues come up too in this sort of situations. Mental health is something that has to be considered, and also safety. And while the order is for people, the emergency order is for folks to stay safe at home, we do recognize that every living situation, every home situation isn't exactly safe. And we have to be able to have every possible measure in place to make sure that we're doing this the right way. And people are learning on the fly. I don't know a governor in the country right now who's ever had to deal with this before. So everybody across this entire country is learning, and we're also dealing with some of the significant challenges like PPE shortage, the shortage of testing kits that are available. That's a real problem right now, and it's one that the whole country is facing.
Let's talk about kind of the safety and the bounce back program. What went into decisions? Why the specific date? All the questions that you kind of hear out there. Can you kind of elaborate a little bit more into the decision process of specifically why May 25th and all the kind of discussions around that, just to really give everybody a clear idea of why you made that decision to extend?
Yeah, and that's the thing too. All of this is, aspirational. I would have loved if the order could have been lifted at the end of this. I don't think there's anybody, and I've said this on, in multiple ways, that nobody wanted this to happen. We're not doing this because it's fun. We have lives too. We all have lives, right? Right there, everybody's being disrupted in some sort of way. This isn't some exercise in convenience for us by any means. So choosing the later date in May was one that looked at the projected models and seeing where Wisconsin could potentially be if we did not adhere to an order that kept people in their homes, right? And hopefully it changes it, and maybe it could get lifted earlier. But states like Virginia, I think, are all the way out to June 2nd.
Yeah. And obviously there's a lot of protesters, and I don't really want to go into like the political side of this and their decision to protest, at the health risks of it. But I want you to talk more about what you think the worry is, why people would put their life on the line to open up a store that they might not even own or something, things like that. Like,
Yeah.
get beyond the politics of it and really talk about why you think people are upset like that.
Yeah, I mean, people are frustrated. This is not a comfortable time for
Yeah.
anybody. There is a genuine frustration that's shared amongst people. Even those, even the most level-headed people are frustrated right now. I get that. That's real. That should be expected. People within government are frustrated. Like I said, this is not something that people wanted to happen. The pandemic itself, or even the response, but necessary. Desperate times call for desperate measures. However, when it comes to issues like the protests, there are a lot of people who capitalize on the genuine fears and concerns that everyday folks have. Losing a job is not fun. The potential of losing a job is not fun. Even getting furloughed is not fun. It's not something that people long for. It's going to make you very upset, frustrated, and confused. But it's unfortunate that those fears and those concerns have been exploited in the form of those protests. And the people who've been impacted the most by the COVID-19 pandemic, you look at the breakdown of people, where they're from, and you can break it down, racially, you can break it down in economic terms as well. And those are the people that were represented at the protest. We're not talking about the people who are losing their lives. These aren't the folks who are out there at the protest. And I've called this selfish before, because to go there and protest and demand that everything just reopens right away is to say that it felt like a lot of the people there, they posited their whole presence as if they are the only people who are being impacted, which couldn't be from the truth. And then, I see a lot of people talk about, a reopening, a regional reopening, and it sounds like a good idea. And if you have a regional reopening, if you only open up, certain parts of the state to commerce that's not available in other areas, then you are going to drive people from impacted areas to those parts of the state that have been reopened. And, somebody on a call last week likened it to a swimming pool having a section that you could pee in. And, nobody's going to want to get in that pool if there's one part of the pool that you can urinate in, right? And so that's sort of the same way. If you open up one part of the state for activity, people are still going to be, there's still going to be a level of contamination that doesn't make folks comfortable. And like I said, in theory, it sounds amazing. And, I wish that were a direction that we could take, but responsibly, it's not.
There's obviously the pandemic is hitting communities of color harder than other communities. Why do you think that is? What are some of the things that you guys are discussing?
I can talk to you forever about this. I think that COVID-19 has highlighted some of the greater flaws that we have in our society, and that's economic inequality, it's access to healthcare, and it's also other just general issues of inequality that have existed forever. And now that people are dying at a disproportionate rate because COVID-19 is in the news, people are dying at disproportionate rates from other things, whether it's heart disease, diabetes in communities of color, or becoming very sick and very, very dependent on our healthcare system. And these things have been here before, and now all of that's being highlighted. You look at people with the least access to healthcare statistically amongst racial lines, and I think it's very parallel if when you look at the impact that COVID-19 has had on the same communities.
Yeah. Let's talk about, there's definitely some, there's going to be economic impacts of long-term economic impacts of this. With any pandemic, there is uncertainty, then there's a response, and then there's the recovery. What is the state planning for right now as far as the future of recovery? Or what are kind of some of those discussions you're having? What are some of the ideas maybe being floated around that you're brainstorming or thinking about of how to kind of jumpstart this economy back?
Right, that's the thing. We have to look at the economy as it was pre-COVID-19
Yeah.
and look at what were the bigger problems, because right now we have the way our economy is shaped is very unstable, especially when you have as much wealth concentrated at the higher end as you do. Like it's just not a stable structure. It matters because if all the wealth is at the top and the people who generate the most activity in the economy, the people who spend all of their money because they have to, because they're low wage workers, if those folks are laid off and don't have money, then how can we sustain ourselves on the other end of this pandemic? We have to have a more even structure. That means we need to have more support for our small businesses that keep communities going. And you look at the large, we can use airlines and the bailout for airlines, for instance, right? We've all been on airlines. We've all been treated like crap by airline before, right? And the fact is, they can get away with that because there are so few airlines now. Because all of these mergers, they're allowed to get away. If one of them fails, that's like a significant chunk of the airline industry. That's why these huge mergers are just not good for economies. And also, when you don't have enough support for small businesses, and you look at even one of the first CARES Act that passed Congress, it wasn't fair. The money wasn't proportionally allocated to small businesses. And you see that the Lakers returned their loan. Like, well, why were the Lakers even eligible?
Yeah.
For why did they even apply for one of these loans in the first place? And it's one of those things, like Rihanna said, it's not, don't tell us you're sorry because you're not. You're only sorry you got caught. Somebody found out that the Lakers ended up getting this loan, and they decided that they wanted to be the good guys and give that money back. And it's been that way for a long time. Inequality it exists because we have a system that allows for it to exist.
Obviously there are some people that can't not or have to go in the office and have to go into work still, but you're seeing a lot more people that are going to be working out of home and doing this remote workforce thing. That has many different economic impacts. It forces the onus of the office to be on the expense of the employee as an expense of the employer. But it also requires a lot of things. It also requires equitable broadband to, across the state. What, have you guys talked about internet policy going forward or anything else about broadband equality? Obviously some places in rural Wisconsin and also in the city of Milwaukee, even there's just access can be limited, especially the speeds you need to be streaming and things like that. Yeah. Is that something you guys are talking about long term?
Yeah, man, that's something we've been talking about before this pandemic. Broadband access has been an issue for a long time, and it limits economic opportunities for people in more rural parts of the state. And in our original budget in last year, we proposed $78 million to expand broadband access. That number was cut down to about $48 million, if I'm not mistaken. And I mean, it's still a substantial increase, but we definitely could have done a whole lot more, or the legislature could have done a whole lot more to increase broadband access to help people get connected. And I know that now, even you mentioned inner city, it really doesn't matter where you're at. I think people all over the state who even have access to broadband are experiencing slower than normal speeds just because there are so many people who are working from home. And you hit the nail on the head too when you talk about folks who have to go into work every day, because it is a luxury that people can work from home. And we see our frontline workers who my hat goes off to them, because they're doing the Lord's work. These are the people who are putting their lives at risk, literally, and they don't have an option to go to work from home. And our view of what a frontline or what an essential worker is has changed. And if it hasn't changed, it should change. And we're talking about the same folks who were talking about getting $15 an hour, and people kind of laughed at them. People thought, oh, you don't deserve $15 an hour. But these are the same people who are at work right now, who are making sure that you have food on your plate, who are making sure that you are fed, who are making sure that society is still functioning with some sort of normalcy. So yeah, I mean, the broadband issue is important. It's one that has been around before, and we have tried we have tried our best to put more money into it. Like I said, there was a substantial increase in the last budget, but it wasn't what we proposed.
What about, more with systems too of even government itself? I had Caleb on from DWD the other day, and the kind of the outdated systems of government, and so I imagine some of the platforms they're using and software. That has to be something that has, we don't talk about those upgrades as we talk about roads and bridges and all that, but those infrastructure updates could be vital to people getting the resources they need quickly as far as unemployment in this specific case. But I mean, is that an investment that you might bring up to the legislator and going forward, is how do we get off some of these archaic systems and come
Yeah.
into the modern age of even government?
Yeah, man. I mean, all the conversations about modernization need to be happening. All the conversations about infrastructure need to happen. And when we talk about infrastructure, people need to realize that it's more than just roads. It's about a more robust public transportation infrastructure, but also the broadband infrastructure, also our energy infrastructure. And that's why, since I've been in this office, I've been championing the need for us to be more energy independent, to make sure that we have more renewable energy options in this state to power our communities. So yeah, of course, updating government systems to make them function appropriately in this sort of situation, especially when you have an influx, and it comes down to capacity, and whether it be people who are filing unemployment claims or whether it be people who are requesting an absentee ballot. We should have had the capacity to be able to handle that sort of an election, regardless of if an all mail-in election is mandated by state law. The fact is we should have had the capacity to be able to respond to an absentee ballot request from every eligible voter in the event that did happen. And there should have also been an emergency provision that would have just mailed out a ballot automatically, given a situation like this. And it doesn't mean that, a lot of states just, I forget, there are a handful of states that just do that anyway, but we should have been able to respond to that call. And I think that a lot of questions right now, that on the silver linings, that a lot of questions about modernization, a lot of questions about democracy are being asked now. And again, this is something that on the other side of the pandemic that people are going to have to respond to. And a lot of this stuff, we've been calling for a long time. Even like, something as simple as automatic voter registration, which the governor put in the budget in 2019. It's about, it is a question of access. And we are seeing during this pandemic that access is not equitable.
And if you have any questions for the Lieutenant Governor, there is a Q&A section. Post in the Q&A. They don't all have to be serious like this one. If someone wants to know what's in your Instapot, so we can you can refer that. You can ask the one if there's anything in there right now.
There's nothing in there right now. I think I'm gonna make some yogurt. I made some tomato sauce yesterday because I had a bunch of tomatoes and they were going bad. I put some meat in there, some ground turkey. But I think I'm gonna make yogurt in the Instant Pot this time.
So that question answered. I can mark that one off. On a more serious note, we've been doing a lot of programs on the Cloud Cafe, and a lot of parents I've been talking with. And one of the things that keeps coming up, and you mentioned this earlier, is just the impacts on children and mental health. A lot of parents I've been talking to have been talking to me about the fear of their children maybe leaving the house in the future, and kind of the mental health impact of not having relationships with friends, even though they might be digitally connecting. When you're younger, it's kind of not the same, right? You're not going to have a full digital conversation with people, but that relationships. So are you seeing a spike at the state office? I know I've seen some numbers around the mental health calls into the hotline spiking a lot. Are you seeing more of that? And are you guys thinking about the long-term impacts of that at all?
Yeah, so I personally have not, I can only imagine, just logic says that those calls have spiked, but I cannot confirm with the exact numbers what it was pre-pandemic to today. But I mean, that's something you have to imagine. And I've been thinking about this a lot, about children's growth and the classroom time that they are missing out, the recreation time that they are missing out on right now, and it will have an impact. There's going to be a lot. We are dealing with a whole lot right now, but we have to think about the residual that people are going to experience. And, that is a part of the planning. It has to be a part of the planning. There has to be a plan that's, I want Wisconsin obviously leading this effort. I want us to be, on the forefront, but it takes investment. It takes people first understanding that there is a problem on the horizon, and it takes forward thinking. And I honestly, this isn't being political. I can honestly say that I don't know that level of forward thinking has always been there. Otherwise, we would have been more well equipped to handle this. And I wish that the federal government would have responded earlier to the pandemic, when the warning signs were out there, when the reports, when the memos were published that stated that we were in trouble. But it was ignored for a long time. Even, and it's not political to say that the governor called for the legislature to meet, and the legislature didn't meet for almost a month. Right? It's not political. That is literally what happened, as government procedure that did or did not happen. They could have met at the onset. When it didn't even take necessarily forward thinking. It could have taken the fact that, oh wow, we are in trouble. We are dealing with something. We should have a response to it. But people drag their feet on that, and only people. I mean, it creates it makes for a tremendous disservice for the residents of Wisconsin.
And you mentioned kind of reopening and needing tests. And there's a couple of questions in the queue here about specifics. And obviously people can go to the Badger Bounce Back program website if they want all the specifics on the program. One of the things that we're talking about is the needs for tests and how are we going to get those tests. I think that's actually the confusion that we hear multiple different stories about when are we going to test? How are we getting more tests? How is the private company stepping up? How is the government stepping up? Can you talk more about how are we going to get more tests? How are we going to get, how many more do we need? Where's that coming from? Can you talk about that whole kind of situation?
Yeah. So last month, the governor he announced a private-public partnership with companies like Exact Sciences and Epic. To get more testing kits and more PPE materials for folks, and there are a couple other manufacturers as well. A couple other medical device suppliers and manufacturers as well that we went into that public-private partnership with. And some states, like right now, you look at New York, who's dealing with this obviously much more than anybody else. One reason being population and the concentration of folks in New York, but they had to rely on other states to get ventilators shipped to them so they can help meet the need. And this is, it just takes out of the box thinking and partnerships for us to be able to meet the critical need. And I can say that we're not exactly where we need to be, or else the Badger Bounce Back plan we would be at step 2, but we're not there. But I can't say that there are a whole bunch of states who actually are there right now, unless you think about more sparsely populated states, like a Montana or something that probably won't experience this at the same level, even as a Wisconsin.
Yeah, are you guys talking to all the states obviously surrounding us, Illinois?
Yeah.
Upper Michigan, which is pretty much Wisconsin.
It's Wisconsin.
Minnesota, Iowa. Are you guys? What kind of conversations are you having? Obviously, it's impacting each state differently.
Yeah, I'll say that. I will say that the lieutenant governors, we were the first ones hopping on Zoom calls, talking to each other. Michigan, Minnesota, and Illinois. But the governors of Michigan, Minnesota, Illinois, I think Indiana and Kentucky have entered into a partnership. And they are working together to make sure that, nobody is getting ahead of each other. And if there is a sort of reopening, that discussion happens first, so that no state is necessarily left behind, given the fact that we border each other and, people travel between states in the region quite often. And if one state is to reopen things quicker, that could have dire consequences for a bordering state, which is not what we want to happen. It's about, making sure that those partnerships are in place so that there's a line of communication and best practices too, because, Minnesota was out in front of us with the way that they responded to it. Therefore, they were a little bit ahead of us too, with some of the ways that they opened the state back up. So it's important for us to be able to speak to one another, have that open dialogue, so that, we can look to see, yeah, well, when we did XYZ, ABC happened.
Yeah. And, speaking about opening back up, obviously golf courses were the whole big deal, but I don't want to harp on that. The state parks are opening back up May 1st. Tell us about why, I guess, a lot of the county parks were still open and then the state parks closed, but now they're opening back up. What led to that decision, and what makes you think that people won't flood the state parks again and, have to close them back down? Or do you think that the education is now stronger around how to socially distance, and that's why what led to that decision?
Yeah, so we know the reasons why the state parks closed. There were some, people weren't practicing the social distancing. There was documented, vandalism. People took hand sanitizer dispensers, stuff like that. Very unfortunate behavior. But now that warning, is out there, I think folks will think twice. I think people are going to be a little more vigilant about things that they see other people doing at a state park that may not be the best activity, and there will be a presence to just to make sure people are appreciating our public spaces and understanding the need for us to connect in some sort of way, right? This is everything for a lot of folks, being able to get out of the house and participate in some sort of physical activity. So I do think that the understanding of the whole point of social distancing and practicing, adhering to the guidelines is there this time around.
What about, obviously rent, I know that we're not seeing the full impact of rent people able to pay rent, people pay their mortgage, businesses be able to pay their rent as well. And, I've seen a lot of information and a lot of call that people, landlords shouldn't charge rent. Well, landlords still have to pay their mortgage too. So what, if that's the case, is there something being talked about not having some kind of tax holiday then for the landlords? So then there's kind of everybody's not paying in that regard. Or what are some of the creative solutions, I guess, you guys are thinking about if, no one's paying, someone eventually has to pay something. And, the last thing people pay are their taxes to the government. So
that's the thing too. I mean, you talked about, you mentioned tax holiday. This whole thing is a tax holiday of sorts. I mean, sales tax. That is the figures that are projected are startling, and it's not just here. It's a situation that we're dealing with across the entire country. I can't speak specifically to that because I haven't had that conversation with the governor, but apart from the things that the Department of Revenue has been able to do internally, we have extended the deadline for tax filing. And we also proposed 2 comprehensive legislative packages where we waive interest and penalties on late property tax payments, allow municipalities to receive payments in installments, and also increase the earned income tax credit, which would help working families ease their burden, I should say. That's just a couple of ways. I mean, that's the thing. There's always so much more that could be done, and there's always more conversations that we could be having to figure out the best approach, right? And
totally.
I don't know who's going to get this thing, who's going to figure it out, who's going to have the perfect response to all this. But this input is necessary. This input is needed. You look at some of the other issues that folks have been talking about for a while. I mean, we try to be as responsive as possible. And, as a state, we have to be responsive to the people who are in need the most, because the people who are in need the least typically get the most when it comes to recovery packages. And that whole dynamic has to be shifted in order for us to be more economically sustainable on the other side.
And I'll get to a couple of the questions from the audience at the end. I got just a couple more thoughts here. Is there anything that you guys at the state level, decisions that you wish you could have went back and changed? Anything that would you have put shelter in place sooner? Or is it what are some of the things you talked about? I wish we could go back and do that. And then on the flip side of that question, what are you guys doing to prepare then if this happens, if there's a rebound?
hmm So I think maybe maybe a little bit sooner. Safer at home could have happened. I think that, but it's tough, right? Like when you're like people will say, "Oh, you're overreacting," and yeah, could it be possible that you're overreacting? Maybe, but
Hmm.
you look at the rate of infections and the rate of transmissions. I think that we could have. It's possible that that could have been slowed down, but I would say there isn't too much different, right? Like I think maybe we weren't far behind any
Yeah.
other state issuing our safer at home order. And I think that there's a very thoughtful and intentional approach to doing that. But yeah, maybe a few days before, and I think even when it came to working to compel the legislature to meet, I think that building a coalition to come up with a set of demands to bring to the legislature could have been, a little bit more helpful as well, because they spent a lot of time. They have spent a lot of time essentially running from the issue or downplaying the issue, because there are still some folks in the legislature that don't think that this is a real thing, that think that feel that we are overreacting. And of course, like I said, it's not comfortable. It's not something that we want to do. I mean, you break a bone, you put on a cast. A cast is not comfortable. You don't want to wear a cast. It's not convenient. But it's going to help you out in the long run, so you get your bone placed back in as it should be.
Yeah, I'm going to take some questions from the audience, and there's a lot of questions, and there's some statements. I'll take the questions here. What are you doing to prepare for the November election? If let's say we're in the same kind of place, and maybe we see a rebound spike. What is the plan at the state level for all the elections? We know what happened in this latest election. Can you address that?
Yeah, so the election question is one that's heavy on a lot of folks' minds, especially heavy on my mind. As I can even say my policy director in my office, she went on the website and she doesn't even know her vote got counted.
Yeah.
There are a lot of people who, a number of folks who I know who never received a ballot. The Assembly Democratic leader, Gordon Hentz, he got his ballot late. He didn't cast a ballot. He wasn't going to take the risk to go vote on election day. People like, Bill Walsh at CBS 58, right? He didn't go out to, he had to make the choice to go risk he and his partner's, health by going out to vote, right? And I think that should put the, onus obviously on the state, on the Elections Commission, to be able to facilitate an all mail-in election. The city of Milwaukee will be mailing out ballots to all the registered voters in the city, which is absolutely the right move. But also, I think as a state, we need to be able, even if we don't do it initially, we need to build up our capacity to be able to mail out a ballot to every registered voter in the state. That means working with the clerks. That means making sure that we have a process so people can get registered to vote more easily, and also have a ballot in their hand. I think that is the only way to go. If this thing has blown over, which I hope it is by November, then people can go vote in person. But we need to be able to do that.
There's a question from Francis about the fees for the state parks. I don't know if they're charging a fee. I thought I heard something where they were waiving the fee initially for state parks that are opening back up, but I'm not sure.
Yeah, so the fee thing was on the front end, and the membership for state parks. I mean, that had been in place before. That's not.
Yeah, because I think it's $30 a year. I can't remember what it is, but okay. Will there be antibody testing in place when we're in a more stable place? I don't know if you can respond to that or not.
I can't respond to that specifically.
Yeah.
I haven't had that conversation.
Yeah.
The initial COVID-19 testing.
Karina asks, how often are you communicating with lieutenant governors in normal times? Do you have a good relationship with them before the pandemic, or has this kind of been a response?
Yeah, we had a pretty solid relationship before. We'll see them at least a few times a year at our conferences, and just over text, just shooting different ideas to one another. So yeah, I did have solid relationships, at least with the ones in this region. You who are outside of the region, Pennsylvania, New Mexico, a couple other states.
Yeah. Let's see, one more here. What are you doing personally to continue practicing empathy and patience during this time? The personal question.
Yeah. I am personally, when it comes to empathy, just recognizing the sacrifices that so many people, have been making, right? That's something that is never ever lost on me. I mean, you look at so many people who are doing, so much. You look at our first responders, be it, police, fire, EMS, but that's also our bus drivers. That's also our hospital professionals, not just the doctors and nurses, but everybody else, all the support staff that keep the building up and running. These people are providing just a vital service to our state. They are all essential. So the empathy goes very far, but also recognizing the challenges that many people have right now. Recognizing the challenges of communities that have always been hit the hardest, and the communities that before COVID-19 who had it tough. I mean, these are in far too many instances people that I'm friends with, people I'm related to, people I associate with. So the empathy piece is never lost on me. The compassion piece is never lost on me either, and it's always on my mindset to make sure that I do my best to be in a position to speak to the needs. Otherwise, I shouldn't be where I am now, right? Like I want to make sure that I'm always talking for those folks who grew up in the same neighborhoods that I grew up in, with the same schools that I went to, because there aren't a whole lot of people who are there, able or willing to do that.
We have a question we actually didn't cover, and a great question. The screen name is TYJAC. What's being done about the prison population, and what do you guys, people with obviously catching COVID-19 in the prison population and short confines, or what are you guys talking about, and what's being done on that level?
Yeah, and that's our Department of Corrections Secretary Kevin Carr and the governor. I know they've had conversations about how to best address that situation. Just like any people in any confined space, and it's a very difficult, delicate topic, because there are folks who would be eligible for parole, but we got to make sure that there's testing also for releasing people from the prison system. But I can only speak to knowing conversations that happen between them. I have not. Unfortunately, I haven't been a part of those conversations as to what exactly the plan is to get vulnerable members of our correction system out of there.
And that was, you wanted to reiterate, that's Ty Jackson from Providence. So
yeah,
you wanted to tell his name. From the Baptist church you visit a lot.
It's her.
Yeah. Okay. Perfect. I think that's all the questions from the audience. If you have any more questions, put those forward. And there's a Q&A section, or you can actually use them in the chat. Actually, we got one from Liz. Any specific conversations or plans for the future for the Wisconsin farmers that are being impacted by this, and obviously the supply chain and the food systems? We're reading a lot of stuff around companies dumping food instead of distributing it to the areas.
Yeah. You may have read about farmers who've been dumping milk. And so I was just at Second Harvest. I took my office to go volunteer safely at a distance. My whole office went to Second Harvest here in Madison last week to go volunteer to fill up boxes, and they are working with some of our farms to figure out how to get that milk that they otherwise would have dumped into communities, into homes of people who need it right now. But I can say also that we were experiencing a crisis prior to COVID-19, with Wisconsin's family farms, and with the idea of a possible disruption in the food chain. I think that gives us an opportunity on the brighter side of things to act more locally, to shop more locally, to spend money in a more farm to table way. where we can support our struggling, agriculture operations in the state at the same time while providing high quality, we're about putting high quality food on our plates and in our kitchens.
Paul really wants me to ask, what are your plans for your own future?
Oh my God.
But yeah, we'll table that one. But he asked it a couple of times, so I figured I'd bring it up at least, right?
I'm just trying not to get sick, man. Just trying to stay alive and care about people.
Alexa Cross says, we kind of hit on this earlier a little bit. How do you see things normalizing after 5/26? Will things open in waves? What do you think will happen? I've just been paying locally in Milwaukee here, been paying attention to some of the restaurant scene, and the margins are so slim in the restaurant field that even doing curbside pickup and delivery isn't hitting the numbers for a lot of these restaurants. I think they're down like 70% of sales, even with that. Even if you open up a restaurant and 10 people can come in, that's just not enough to keep it open, probably.
Right.
So I guess, I added a little bit of color to this, but, what do you see this opening in waves, or what do you think will happen?
Yeah, that's the thing. I think it depends on, how comfortable people are, and I looked at, there were a couple things I've been reading, and I think JetBlue is like the first airline that's going to require people to wear masks. And if you think about restaurants, if they get to a place where people are going to be required to wear a mask, I mean, what does that do to the dining experience, right? I think a lot of this is going to fall on the user, and what level of comfort are people going to have returning back to normal? What will normal look like? Are people going to be hesitant to go to a large, being in large crowds, whether it's a concert? That's something that I don't know that government can answer that question. I think a lot of that comes down to the individuals.
Yeah, I think even if stuff opened tomorrow, I couldn't see myself going to have a dinner right now in a restaurant with a bunch of other people. It's just not something I'd be interested in. So, that impact is probably what a lot of people are thinking.
Mm-hmm.
Of course, this question comes up every time. How close are we to legalizing cannabis? Should law enforcement be wearing masks and gloves?
So
you can answer both of those if you want to.
So we are, if you're in Milwaukee, you are 80 miles away from legalization.
Yeah.
That's how close you are to legalize cannabis. That's the legislature. The governor we even put decriminalization in the state budget. We even put medical marijuana in the state budget. They wrote it out. They took it out of the budget. That was a bridge too far for them. Decriminalization and medical marijuana was a bridge too far for the leaders in the state legislature. And, it's fine to point fingers. I just want people to point fingers in the right direction, right? Like, understand, what decisions were made and by who. When I was a state rep, I was one of the authors of full legalization of cannabis here in Wisconsin. So I am, the longtime proponent, but the legislature has been in the way. So we are, however many miles you are away from the Illinois border is how close you are to the to legalization. And the other, what was the second question?
Second question was, sorry, let me just roll back here. Should law enforcement be wearing masks?
Law enforcement, yeah. Yes, anybody who's interacting with the public probably should be wearing a mask, right? If you're law enforcement, chances are you could be pulling people over. You could be just doing wellness checks. Like it probably makes sense for law enforcement officers to have some sort of protection, if not for themselves, for the people around them.
Okay, we're coming up on our time here, but I want to thank you for your time. I got one kind of closing question here that I want to, getting beyond, we got a little bit beyond COVID-19, but obviously that took up most of the conversation, as all conversations are about this right now. I just kind of want to go a little bit outside of it, and to close here, what other priorities can you accomplish with this crisis being, or what else are you working on? I feel like, everything gets put to the back burner, all the initiatives. all the other things that are going on. Is that stuff still being discussed, or is it COVID-19 24 hours a day for you guys?
So yeah, COVID-19 is pretty much taking the day. However, legislative session has concluded.
Mhm.
It gavelled out already.
Yeah.
So there wasn't a whole lot of legislative business that would have been going on right now. So COVID-19 gets essentially all the focus right now.
Excellent. Well, thank you for your time, Mandela. I appreciate it, and this has been great. Love seeing you as always. And I want to thank Ginger Lazovik and Shorewest Realtors for sponsoring the Cloud Cafe. Really appreciate you sponsoring all the programs. We're kind of in this time right now where everyone needs to be connected, not just being connected through a Zoom chat, but really authentic connection. And I love the companies that are supporting that and making this possible. So thank you for that as well. Any last shots or any parting advice?
No, man. I appreciate you having me. Thank you. Like
Excellent.
It's good.
And
It's
excellent. Thank you for your time as always. Talk soon.
Man. Yep.